Sorry to say that you are going to have to listen to that truck idle during this entire episode because he's been there for a few hours now and he's not going to turn off the truck. He doesn't have an APU or good enough batteries to just sit there and do anything other than idle, I guess. He's just going to sit there and idle. All right. So let's play catch up. I did not want to do what I did. Of all places they could have sent me, going over the Donner Pass is not what I wanted to do. If they would have sent me up north into Washington, no problem. Oregon, Washington, they want to send me down to LA. That's fine too. You may say, but Alan, don't you want to get out of California since you don't like it? Yeah, very much so. But that doesn't mean that I want to go right over the Donner Pass right after 2 days of rain and storms. Because I'm going to pick up right where we left off. In the last episode, I was stuck on the Donner Pass. Come to find out that there was a Mazda that hit a semi. I think I mentioned that because I heard it on the CB radio. And when they finally released the traffic, we were creeping along. Now, right before they released us, I was looking at the Caltrans website, and I was looking to see if the chain law was in effect, if they had put it in there. Because if so, I was going to use my time efficiently since I was shut down and go ahead and put on the chains. Now, that didn't happen though. I mean, they did not put a chain law in effect at that point. And I went to the CHP Truckee Facebook group, and they just had a couple of videos of trucks spinning out. And they said that there were multiple trucks that were spinning out, and because of that, they had shut down and closed the Donner Pass. I was only about 15 miles away from Nevada before Truckee when it happened, right at Donner Lake. And I was wondering if they were going to make us go full throttle with the chains, but no. Now, this is one thing that I was glad to see, because when Schneider issued me tire chains, they gave me a total of 4. And if they would have gone full throttle with the tire chains at that point, that means 4 on each side for a total of 8, maximum amount. And they usually do that if there is any kind of a problem. I've noticed that they usually just will say, oh yeah, all chain. Just if you're going to chain up, do them all. But they released us. We were creeping along. We all, it was like clockwork. We had 2 lanes, but the trucks and cars out there were very good about combining into 1 lane. There wasn't fighting and that kind of thing. And because they had closed down the road, the plows up ahead had cleared off the road and put that de-icing stuff down, and there was a bunch of sand. I think there was sand at that point. But the roads were in good shape. They weren't frozen, which I was very happy about, despite all the snow that had happened, causing all the crashes. Because, you know, if there's snow, it gets compacted down, and then the temperature freezes, gets too low, it's going to turn into ice. Black ice at that. So anyway, I was just looking at my phone and hitting refresh on the site because I wanted to check, see if there was chains going into effect as soon as possible. That way I could use that time efficiently. Never happened. And all of a sudden I see up ahead, trucks start moving and cars start moving. So I go ahead and crank up the engine again, get things going, and I creep out of there. Now, at this point, by the time it releases, it had been over 2 hours. And I had gotten pretty much, I was out past Nevada. And at this point, I'm looking at the tablet, and it's counting down my last hour on my 14-hour clock. And you know how it is. You have 11 hours of the day of your 14 hours that you can drive. And as soon as you start to go into, as soon as your time on the 14-hour clock becomes less than the amount of total drive time you have left on your 11 hours, it starts to count down your 11-hour drive clock. So here I was watching it go down and down and down. And now there is, when things are frozen, there are no turnoffs on the Donner Pass. You can't just turn off someplace and exit. There was one rest area that was right probably about 300 or 400 feet away from where I stopped, right at Donner Lake. But it had 8-foot tall snow, completely blocked, and the rest area was closed. So we had to drive on past. The next thing was there was a downward thing that went back up, and that was for a turnoff there at Donner Lake. And there was a police officer down there stopping, checking, for anybody that's going to go on that side road. And anyway, I start creeping along, and traffic is moving probably between 5 and 10 miles an hour, not very fast at all. And as soon as we come to a chain up area, I see all these trucks pulled off, and some of them are lined up to get chains on. And I'm seeing all these people, and I'm thinking big eyes. I'm like, did they just change that? I haven't seen any signs. When I was literally actively looking at the app to see if the chain law was going to go into effect, and it didn't by the time I started to go. So I put down my phone and started creeping on out there. Now, that last 15 miles or so took over an hour for me to go. Because, we weren't trying to win any land speed records. We were creeping along and being safe. Some trucks and cars flew past, but I'm not about to do that. Especially after seeing the videos on the California Highway Patrol Truckee Facebook group of semi spinning out, and there was a lot of trucks. And I did see the collision between a Mazda and a semi, and that semi happened to be a tanker. It looked like there was a little bit of fire damage, but it didn't look like there was much, like it was caught early. So good job there. Now, to be completely honest, I might have been misreading the situation. It might not have been. It might not have been a fire at all, and it might have just been, something else. But I glanced at it. I didn't want to sit there and glue my eyes to it because, we were trying to be, concentrate on the game plan there. But anyway, my 14-hour clock was getting low, and I am following along in traffic. We were all single file, even though it's 2 lanes there. And by the time I went into a violation, it was right about the time I passed over the Nevada border. And I'm hearing it say driving violation on the tablet. Driving violation. I'm like, oh goody. So I am still looking for the first safe and legal place, which is what Schneider always says, find a safe and legal place. And I am looking for the first safe and legal place for me to pull off. And there was none from the time that I was shut down on the interstate up until right as you got out of the Donner Pass into Verde, just barely over the Nevada border. Verde, which I think means green in Spanish, if I remember correctly. Verde, Nevada, right across from the casino. There is a truck parking area that's just a pull-off. It just loops out and loops back over. And I stopped there, parked it for the night, 6 minutes over my violation. And I texted, or not texted, but I used a communication tool and informed Schneider that due to weather delays, which is exactly true because there was weather that caused collisions, and then they had to clear it. So they had cleared off the roads so we could safely get out of there. And so I sent a communications message through to the detail team and let them know that I went into violation due to bad weather. And the FMCSA allows us to extend our clocks for 2 hours drive time and 2 hours on our 14-hour daily clock if we are in a situation with bad weather. I mean, what are you supposed to do? If I wasn't delayed there for over 2 hours, what if it was over 6? I'm going to go into violation. Does that mean that the FMCSA would say, Alan, you now are going to be cited? If a police officer pulls me over or if something like that and he says, let me see your logs, are they going to say, well, you're in violation and give me a citation? If so, I would fight that because it was through no fault of my own. On my clock, I had, I think if memory serves, an hour and 38 minutes, an hour and 43 minutes or something like that when I got stopped there. And to go an extra 15 miles, even if I was going at 15 miles an hour, even if I was going 10 miles, no. 10 miles an hour would have been, yeah. I probably still would have made it if I was going 10 miles an hour, creeping through the Donner Pass at just 10 miles an hour. I would have still made it to where I was and not in violation. And that would have just been on my 11 hour. And We were only creeping along at maybe 5 to 10 miles an hour for the first 2 or so miles. After that, we got up to about 25 or 30, maybe even a little bit more than that. But it took me about an hour to get out of the Donner Pass. And I think it was like 50 minutes or something left on my clock, maybe 48 minutes, something like that. Whatever it was, my total time was 6 minutes over. Not a big deal. I went ahead and stopped. I recalculated my ETAs because I had been planning to make it to what my trip plan had been, is to make it to our drop lot in Sparks, which is just on the east side of Reno. And I could have made it there. I mean, if I had the time, you know, if I was going anything faster than 10 miles an hour the entire time from when I stopped up until the edge of the Donner Pass, I could have, you know, accelerated again as soon as I was through the Donner Pass, and I could have gotten there to Sparks with only minutes left on the clock. And that was if I was going 10 miles an hour through the entire Donner Pass. I could have still made it to the Sparks, because when I stopped at that parking spot there, we were less than 10 miles away from that drop lot. So I know I could have made it there, no problem. So I went ahead and shut down there for the night. Now, whenever I am driving a long haul, I have said many times I like driving in the middle of the night. But at the same time, when I am assigned something like 2 stops and then I have to go through the Donner Pass, and I'm not going to get done until and be able to completely stop for the day until like 9 something p.m. Normally there's issues parking by then. I was luckily able to find a good parking spot. Now, I like to take a minimal amount of off time, my 10 hours. I'm not like many of these drivers that will just say, I'm going to start every day at 6 a.m. or every day at 7 a.m. or something like that. I will start at the earliest time usually, because I won't mind driving one bit if I wake up at 10 p.m. and start driving overnight. I don't mind. I like that, as a matter of fact. And it's not a problem at all with circadian rhythm disruptions or anything like that. I prefer it because I can focus on driving. I don't have to deal with drama of the road and whatever else. But anyway, so I stopped. I stopped for the night, and I looked at it by the time I finished doing my post-trip inspection and I did my DVIR and logged out. I set my clock for 9.5 hours away. And I actually got up at about 9 hours. I was up a little bit. I was pretty amped up still because I was pretty wide awake. I had slept, I just came off of the 34. So I was very alert. The last night before I got up, I was in a drop lot in French Camp, and I was pretty tired. So I went to sleep, and I slept longer than I think I've slept in a long time, which is normally bad. Normally that kind of thing makes me more tired, but this time it didn't. So I was happy with that. Now, that next morning, I got up at 7. I was able to start my pre-trip at about 7. No. Yeah. 7 something a.m. I had changed when I first left French Camp on Tuesday. I had looked at as soon as I was pre-assigned, I looked at it and said, oh man, I submitted my ETAs. And I submitted a 3 p.m. for Reno. That was optimistic. But the thing was, I looked at it and I said, well, here to Sacramento is like 65 miles. And then from there, I misread it as 18 miles to my second stop because I missed the 0 at the end. So I was like, 18 miles. And then I can easily be to the Donner Pass. Because if it's only 18 minutes, I'll give myself half an hour or round up to the nearest hour. And so that way I said, I'll be in Sacramento at like 8. I set the next time at like 10. And then I said, I should be through the Donner Pass into Reno from Sacramento. I'll give it until 3. Like I should get there before then, because at that point it was before the traffic. It was before traffic was going to get bad in Sacramento, and before the snow was going to start coming down and causing disruptions to the Donner Pass. I'd been looking at the weather. And as soon as I started to look at everything and headed to Sacramento, and when I said, route me to the next location, I looked at it and I said, wait a minute, that's not an 18.1 or 0.0 miles. That's 180 some odd miles. Where is it? Hopefully it's right there on the border. And I looked at it. The Donner Pass from Sacramento is east-northeast. The place I was going was west-southwest. So I literally had to go the exact opposite direction that I wanted to go. I had to go down the 5 and then cut over for about 75 miles on back roads. That did not make me happy when I realized that. So real quick, as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh crap, I'm going to go ahead and resubmit an ETA for Reno of 6 a.m. the following day. My ETA, at that point, I changed my ETA over from 10 a.m. to noon, I think it was that I set. Because I made it to Sacramento a little bit earlier. I think I made it there by like 8:15, 8:30. By the time I loaded up and got out of there, I said, I should be able to make it there by noon without a problem. And I made it there, and I've already said this, but the guy was really good. He had the pod ready. All right, so when I stopped for the night, I resubmitted my Reno ETA from 6 a.m. and changed it to 8 a.m. because I was only like 15 miles away. And I said if I could start my pre-trip after at like 7:04 or something like that, I said I should be in a good shape to get there by 8. And that was if I ran into traffic. The biggest concern I had was that it is one of those dreaded Wednesdays, which means that according to the new pod's hours, our ETAs are very critical because they are on call. Our locations are going to be on call and waiting for us. So I was concerned that because I had changed it from 3 p.m. on Tuesday to 6 a.m. on Wednesday, if they got up and looked at it and all of a sudden I'm going to be at 8 a.m., if they're going to look at it and say, this guy's on his own. He's changed the ETA all over the place. I was concerned that he was just going to be like, nope, I'm just going to, when he gets there and he calls me, then that's going to be when I show up. But he was very, very good. I got to Reno. I mean, after I'd finished my pre-trip, I jumped on the road, had nobody in my way. It was a smooth sailing ride. And right across from me, there was another parking lot going the other direction. And that was where the police were doing checks of chains because they started chain law. Actually, when I stopped for the night in Reno, I looked at it and they had already started the chain law all the way back at Rainbow. And then they pushed it back even farther later. But they had already started the chain law. It just was not in the area I was in. It was probably back before that. So I didn't know it. It started before then. So anybody going through would have had to chain it before they got to where I was. All right. But there was a chain law going on the other side. So as you entered the Donner Pass, that was going to be where it is. And that's the reason why if you drive through the Donner Pass, there is areas where it drops down a couple of inches in two passes because the chains have torn up the road, you know, all in the spirit of traction control and safety. All right. So that Reno, Nevada pod's location, pros. I got there and I greeted him. I apologized that I had sent in a few different ETAs. He's like, no, we appreciate you keeping on top of it and informing us, staying on top of it. And, if there's a change and you submit an ETA, we appreciate that. It's a lot better than not sending anything at all. I'm like, awesome. He had a great attitude. He was already ready for me. So he was like, okay, let me, here's your paperwork and let me just get your paperwork. I'll be right out there with it. He was out there a couple moments later, gave me everything. I tossed the straps. I think I was out of there in 10 minutes. Maybe a little bit more than that. And there was no traffic really in Reno. And then I started driving across the state. Now, I had looked at the weather already. I knew that there was going to be a rainstorm going through Salt Lake City from about 2 until about 3. And then starting about 5, there was going to start to be snow flurries. And they were anticipating that as the temperature dropped and the sun set, it was going to start to get bad. Or at least that's the way I anticipated it to be. I mean, I wasn't on the Utah DOT website or anything like that at that point. I was just concentrating on getting through. But Nevada was smooth sailing. There was a little bit of rain, but nothing that's all that difficult. It wasn't freezing rain or anything like that. Even though it was below freezing, the road didn't freeze up or anything like that. It was just wet. And that's no problem. I can see the splash of the tires and stuff on the vehicles in front of me, and nothing seemed icy. There was no black ice warnings or anything like that. I made it. I stopped for my 30-minute DOT break at the salt flats, right barely inside of Utah. And I looked at the weather and stuff like that, and I said, oh, I got to hit it. I got to hit it and get through there. I got to Salt Lake City, and about 8 miles from where I was out to the point where I-80 goes south onto I-15, and then for like 3 miles, and then goes back onto I-80. At that point, about 8 miles before that, I started to see that there was traffic, not traffic. There was starting to be snow falling. So I was like, oh man, let me get through there. Salt Lake City traffic was not that bad by the time I got there. It was about 5 something, I think, by the time I got there. And I was maybe it was a little bit after that. It was right as sun was about to set. The sun had set by the time I got down 15. I got onto I-80, and I started going up and down those hills that were slowing us down, because everybody was going slow because of the snow. Being safe about this, which is good. And that's when the sun set. And I got completely out of Salt Lake City. I did the turn off at Echo right there where it turns off on the I-84, headed up towards Oregon. And I continued out east, and the snow stopped about the time I entered Wyoming. Maybe just before. I had passed the Welcome Center. Now, I had gotten all the way, I had planned to stop at Evanston. I was going to, there's 2 pilot Flying J's there. And then I think there's like a Love's and a couple others. But right there on the interstate right after that, there is a chain up area, which I didn't know at the time. I just saw it say truck parking. But they use it as a chain up area if Wyoming needs it. At this point, the temperature was, I think, in the 20s. It was starting to get into the high 20s. And the roads were still clear. There was no black ice or anything like that. It was a little bit wet in areas, but it hadn't rained there. I was staying ahead at this point. I had made it through the danger zone. That's the reason why I didn't stop in Salt Lake City and see my friend or anything like that. I just knew I had to get as far out away from Salt Lake City as I could, because the storm was pushing that direction. The farther I could get, the better I was going to be. And as I was going maybe 35, 40 miles an hour, the roads were clear. I saw trucks all over Evanston. I was looking over there. I saw the truck stops looked full, and then they had trucks that were lining up on the sides and stuff like that. I was like, oh, it's going to be packed there. So as soon as I said, I'm going to drive right on through. There's not even a point in me taking these exits and looking for a parking spot. I'm going to go ahead and go to that truck parking lot that ended up being the chain up area too. And it was full. So I pulled over. As soon as I passed Evanston, I had this sinking feeling in my stomach as soon as I go up over the hill and I see nothing but a long line of trucks going into that rest area. And they're lining up on the right-hand side of the interstate. And I'm like, oh no. So for the first time, I pulled over there and stopped. And this time, after I did my post trip, I talked to the truck driver in front of me. I went over and talked to him, and he was smoking. And I said, I've only been driving now for about 6 months, and I've never had to stop on the side of the road before. Is there anything in particular I need to be aware of about that? And he said, no, just keep your 4-ways or your parking lights on all night. He said, I don't think there'll be any issues. Everybody is, out here tonight. I don't anticipate there being, because I asked him, I said, is there a risk of police officers coming by and ticket us? He says, I don't think they're going to do that. I think they pretty much understand that Wyoming's in bad shape right now and that everything is full. It would be a total jerk move if they did, but he says, I don't anticipate them doing that. So I went ahead and closed up my curtains and brushed my teeth and got myself situated. And I looked ahead, and the gap in the curtains that you can look through in the front and see like this the window at the top. It's because the tablet's in the way, so it doesn't close correctly. Because because of that, I normally am able to see through there, and I saw the lights on in the truck in front of me, but then I didn't see the truck or the lights on anymore. So I peek up over it, and the truck in front of me had pulled forward like 200 feet. So I was like, oh. So I go ahead and crank it up, and I creep forward. Technically, as long as you keep it under 5 miles an hour, you're okay. It doesn't log you are moving or anything like that. I know technically the DOT and the FMCSA says once you stop, you're not supposed to move again. Otherwise, you're supposed to log in and, on duty before you move. But I'm doing it for safety reasons. I'm staying, because I know there's going to be other trucks in front. Anybody who's going to pull up in front and try to parallel park in front of me is going to be backing up on I-80. No, I'm not going to do that to somebody. I crept up. I think that that's an appropriate use. It's not like I'm trying to accelerate to try to do something. I'm trying to stay tight, stay with the group, and do it for safety reasons, so that way that the trucks behind me will be able to do it. So I creep forward at like 2 miles an hour in second gear. First and second gear, if you idle and go forward, it goes at 2 miles per hour. If you're in third gear, it goes at 3 miles an hour. Fourth gear at 4 miles an hour. Fifth gear in 5, and I think it goes up to 7. So if you want to keep it under 5 miles an hour, it's not going to hit your log as to, hey, it looks like you're driving. Keep it below fourth. I was in second. I crept forward and then stopped again, and truck didn't move again that night. But I tell you, parked on the side of the interstate, literally 8 feet away, like where that truck is next to me. I mean, about that close, maybe another foot or two was about where that lane for I-80 started. And so all night I'm hearing trucks go by. After a while, I started to hear the rubber on the tires turn into chains every now and then. So I know that people were chaining up because they had gone through Salt Lake City, which got 6 inches of snow that night. I would like to add, I saw on a Schneider forum, somebody posted a picture the next afternoon and said 6 inches of snow in Salt Lake City. So anyway, I had, by the time I got to sleep, it took me a little bit longer to get to sleep because I was hearing, all the vehicles go right by me. And then it was right as I was just about to doze off, I'd hear one of those big loud trucks, just really loud, Jakes, and just a loud truck in general. And I'm like, wide awake again. Well, I slept only like 2.5 hours. And then I laid there trying to get back to sleep, and I couldn't for anything. But I laid there, and when I got to about the point when it was about an hour from when my alarm was going to go off, I knew I had no chance in the world of getting back to sleep. And if I did, I would be more tired. So at that point, I went ahead and got up, and I went outside and just started cleaning the windows and just started to clean off the sensors and all the stuff I could, clean the exterior of the truck and, the areas that were, going to be in, dirty or something like that, for cleanliness sake. That way I could see out the windows correctly. And as soon as that 10 hours hit, I logged in, did my pre-trip, and I hit the road. Well, good morning and welcome to Wyoming and the craziness that happens there. I had looked at the app, and there was black ice reports all over the place, starting before Evanston, right there at the border. So I knew that black ice was already going back into Utah also. Hence why I was hearing some of the tire chains. All right. It said that there was no restrictions on the road. So I was like, okay, because if there were, I would go ahead and put the chains on, even though you know me, and I don't want to have to deal with chains if I don't have to. But if I had to, I would have done it right there. I would have gone ahead and chained up before I hit the road. And they'd probably live on my truck until... Basically, the weather looks like right about maybe 10 or 15 miles, maybe about halfway between Laramie and Cheyenne, Wyoming. About that point was where the storm was supposed to be to the edge of that day. The storm was slowly moving its way, creeping across, and it was not really making its way through Utah, but there was an area from above that was coming straight down. And that was going to start to, in like 2 or 3 o'clock hour, it was going to just start to move in a big like clump vertically and cover all of I-80 pretty much simultaneously up to about halfway between Laramie and Cheyenne. And by, I think, like 7 or 8 p.m., it was going to be about the worst it was going to be is over to Cheyenne. So I knew that my big goal was going to be to get out of Wyoming on that Wednesday. That was my big goal, to make it into Nebraska. There was 2 areas, Big Spring and another place 75 miles past that. Big Spring was 504 miles away, and the other one was another, I think, 75 past that. I did not think there was a big chance in me getting to the one that was 574, 575 miles away. My big goal was to try to make it to Big Spring. So anyway, I hit the road, and I'm seeing a lot of trucks driving, and the speed limit is saying it's 35 miles an hour. They have digital, speed limits. It said 45 miles an hour. Then it changed down to 35, and they put up signs that said black ice warning. And I was like, okay, black ice is not something you mess with. But I wasn't seeing or feeling anything, and believe me, I was staying very aware of it. And I was just, going along with things, staying behind the trucks and keeping an eye on them in front of me. And I made it. Now, another thing to note is that I had a fuel assignment that came through when I had first left with this assignment. It was to fill up in someplace on the way to that 180-mile stop. So I filled up in California. And by the time I got over the Donner Pass and Verde and stuff like that, it wanted me to fuel up the next time originally it was Rollins, like at exit like 200, 204, something like that, on I-80 in Wyoming. I had passed the Evanston exit, and my fuel assignment updated at 3-something a.m. Eastern time, and it's telling me to go to Evanston. So it's literally like where I was. If I looked back that direction, I was seeing the pilot flying J it wanted me to go to. So I stood there and I looked out there, and it was a madhouse in that flying J pilot. I was seeing trucks all over the place, and I looked at it and says, you know what? If you want me to stop at a fuel stop, put it in front of me. Do not put it behind me. If I have to go down there, turn around and go back, much less if it's a madhouse, because I looked at it, it was like 8 miles and change. It's the principle of the thing. Do not give me a fuel assignment that's behind me. Give me one in front of me, or figure out a way to compensate me based on where I have to go to get there. I will pull off and take an exit as long as it's in front of me. But I was like, no, I'm not going to go back to Evanston. Especially when it's a madhouse and I'm seeing trucks literally off of the exit just parked on the side everywhere. That pilot flying J had trucks all over the place. So anyway, I hit the road, and I am, because it is slow and because it is going up and down, up and down, up and down hills, I'm watching my fuel miles. Even though I'm being gentle on the gas, I'm seeing the mileage go down lower and lower and lower. And I look at this and say, I'm not going to make it to Rollins. So I remembered looking at it, and Rollins was about 200 miles from where I stopped for the night in Evanston. But about half of that distance, I forgot what it was called, but there was another town that was about halfway there. And on the Pilot Flying J app, and I looked at it, that morning, and it was about it was like 100 miles. And the fuel price was the exact same as it was in Rollins. So when I got over 50 miles away, because, every time the GPS crashes, it routes you to your next assignment, whatever that happens to be. And it kept saying, oh, you need to turn around, make a U-turn at the next street, and then, or next turn off, and then go back to Evanston. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And I'm looking at it saying it's 38 miles back there. At this point, it's like, oh, take this exit, then make a turn back onto the thing, and then go 38 miles. I'm like, I'm not doing this. So at this point, I'm just like, okay, as soon as I get over halfway, as soon as I get over 50 miles, so I say 60, I go ahead and update my fuel. and it says, okay, looking for a fuel assignment, updating it. Sometimes it doesn't work. This time it did. It removed the fuel assignment and it put the fuel assignment as that one that was the stop that was 40 miles away. It didn't give it to me until I was almost 20 miles away. And it pops up on the thing, and it has like the pop-ups on the left-hand side. You can hit one of those and it will update in your GPS. So it's, as soon as it says to me, fuel stop has been removed, new assignment, whatever, and it tells me, I glance down at it, I see it, and I hit the button, and it navigates me there. And I was like, thank you, that's good. I pull off, and it tells me it wants me to fill up. But oddly, my Cheyenne, Wyoming fuel assignment was still there. From there, Cheyenne was only like 250 miles. No. Yeah, it was about 250 miles from there. So I looked at that and I was kind of confused. Why does it say 70-gallon fill up? And then it says I still have to go to the Cheyenne, Wyoming. So I say, well, if I'm going to do the fuel assignments, I got to do the fuel assignments. It always likes me stopping in Cheyenne. Well, anytime I'm on 80, it routes me to Cheyenne. So I'm like, I guess they get the very best deals there. So I said, I'm not going to fill up at this fuel assignment, because if I do, I will be too full to fill up in Cheyenne too. But I was running on fumes at this point. I said, I'm going to put in 75 gallons. Now, here's one thing you can do. When you are checking your miles, when they're going to give you a fuel assignment, but when it gives you fuel assignments, sometimes they're there for a couple of days. What you need to do as part of your trip planning is see how long it is distance-wise between your fuel assignments. If it's about 600 or so miles, you can count based on your fuel economy and what your miles per gallon on average is. You're able to kind of figure out that it's going to be about 70 gallons or 65 gallons. And then when you get your next one, you're going to be using about 60 gallons before you get to the next place. I had already done this, and I knew that it was going to be after Cheyenne. Cheyenne was only be like 250 miles away, but after Cheyenne, the next one was going to be 650 miles. And then the one after that was going to be right at about 600. The one after that was going to be about 775. So the way I looked at it was the Pilot Flying J app. They always want us to fuel up at Pilot Flying J's if at all possible. They will only give you a half a point per gallon, more if you fuel up at least 75 gallons. So I looked at that and I said, well, geez, if I'm going to be stopping there, I'm not just going to fill up. I'm going to put in 75 gallons exactly. So I put in like 75 and change. I stopped at right about 76, actually, maybe just before. And then I said, okay, I'm going to fuel up and put 75 more gallons in over at the Cheyenne, because, fuel does get cheaper the farther east you go, until up to a certain point. And so I looked at this and I said, okay, well, it just doesn't want me to fill up. That's fine. I'm going to do this smart. And that way I get my fuel, my points and things build up. And that way it's going to be as good as possible. So I said, all right, that's what I'm going to do. Now, I am going up and down some roads, and it's staying pretty close. The sun comes up after I fuel up. That area between the 100-mile marker and about the 200-mile marker at Rollins, there was a lot of hill still, and I still receive black ice warnings. And I'm not following too closely. I'm making sure that I have now Schneider says that if you're normally you should leave 7 seconds between you and the truck in front of you, the vehicle in front of you. If it's raining, extend that to 14. If it's snowing, extend that to 21. Well, 21 seconds is hard to do because everyone keeps jumping in front of you. And so, I mean, if you keep slowing down, you're not going to go anywhere. You gotta, and what I would do is if somebody gets in front of me, I coast back and then just slowly build some distance while still staying speed. As long as they don't like pull right in front of me, and then I'm like, oh yikes, I'm 2 seconds away. We hit an area where we went up to the top of a hill. I'm listening to the CB radio, and I'm hearing everyone talking about, why doesn't Wyoming put down the de-icing stuff before it becomes crazy? Because the whole of Wyoming was basically a sandbox. They had put so much sand down on the roads that you were driving in sand. But we got to the top of this one hill, And right as you start to go over it, I see that the truck in front of me, because one of the things about having a truck in front of you is you're able to see how they handle things. If they start wobbling or wiggling or something like that, there might be something in the road. There might be, something that they're avoiding. So if they change lanes, it could be because there's a police officer or some sort of a DOT official that's parked on the side of the road, something like that. So that way you can see how they maneuver and you can plan accordingly. But the truck in front of me, as soon as I came up over the top of the hill, I see a truck move from the left lane to the right lane. And so now he's in front of me, and he cut, like I said, people will cut you off. And I saw him, and so I start, because you don't use your Jake brakes or the cruise control or something like that when there is potential black ice. You're just driving and being very gentle on the gas and using your gear, so you'll gear down. Which the International LT, if you press in to go into manual, it doesn't let you shift. You have to downshift, and then you have to hit manual. And if you slow down enough, then you have to go out of manual, downshift again, back into manual. It's annoying. It should allow you, if you're in manual, it should allow you to adjust your gears as long as it is in alignment with the RPMs. But it doesn't let you. It just beeps at you. When you hit the button, it beeps. I hate that. It's like, let me be in control of this thing. If I'm telling you to downshift because my RPMs are getting really low, I want to downshift. Or if I want to upshift and the RPMs are getting high, allow me to upshift. But no, you have to take it out of manual, then upshift, shift or downshift, and then go manual again. Anyway, so I'm cresting the top of the hill and just starting to go down, and the truck pulls over from the left lane in front of me. And at that point, because he was starting to go, I see he's like this. As he's going over there, I see him do this number. I see him, do this number. And then I see him start to do this, and I knew he hit black ice. So at this point, I gently apply the brakes. I gently apply the brakes. There it goes. And about the time I hit that, I feel myself sliding. Now I'm going in a straight line, so as soon as this starts happening, I start, gently tapping the brakes while looking at my mirrors to make sure my trailer isn't coming out around. It's not. Now, black ice does two things. It exaggerates movement and it ignores movement. By exaggerating movement, I mean if you are going there and you're accelerating and you hit black ice, suddenly there's no traction of the wheels and they start spinning freely. And if you're slightly turning, you're going to go vroom. The other thing is it ignores things. I put on my brakes and it ignores it, just sliding at the same speed. As a matter of fact, it might have even been speeding up a little bit because I was going down the hill. So as soon as I start doing this to my brakes, tapping them, and I realize I'm not slowing down, I think, oh crap, I got to slow this thing down. The road I'm on, it's glistening. It's definitely ice because the temperature is, I think, in like 16 to 18 at that point degrees. And I am like, I need to stop. And I look over, and right on the other side of the lane on my right, it starts to be nothing but sand. So what I do is I take my foot off the brake. I go on over just enough to get the right side of my tires over there, and then I gently start applying the brakes again, same kind of way. And I'm watching that trailer. I notice the truck behind me. He sees me do this, and he sees me starting to do this. And as I'm slowing down, I'm checking those mirrors, because I'm watching to make sure that my rear end's not coming around, my trailer's not coming around. And I see him starting to, he tries to stop, and he goes over there, and then he instantly bails off onto the side. He bails off and is like 10 or 15 feet over, and then he straightens up, and his truck is all over the place because it goes slightly down like this. And I was concerned he was gonna tip over, but not there. It was like this. If that was a cliff and he tried that maneuver, he would. Don't want to play around. He was definitely close to me. The truck to my left, he hit his brakes, but he had plenty of room, so he just starts hitting his brakes and controlling it because he continued to pass me. But the truck behind him, that was the other one I was looking at. So as I'm checking my mirrors, I see him bail this way, and I'm watching it. I'm like, okay, so I can't go that way if I need to. And I look back here in this mirror and I see that this truck has apparently, as he was there, he was trying to put on his brakes, and his rear trailer starts to slide around towards my trailer, towards my flatbed. I see him go completely sideways, and this truck here, all of a sudden he steers out like this. So he steers this direction as opposed to just staying straight and releasing his brake and straightening back up. Because I see him turn this way. He goes he's sideways like this, but he maintains it. So his trailer starts to come around. He probably releases his brake at this point, and his front, I see him turn outwards this way. So his entire truck is now in line with his trailer, and they are in a straight line going sideways, like slightly sideways down as we're starting to go over the hill. And I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to get hit by one of these things. Now, I'm still concentrating on the truck in front of me, which is coming up, and I'm slowing down at this point because of my tire that's in the sand, and I'm happy about that. But that truck on that side, he, I guess, releases it, and because the truck on the left side that was next to me up there, and he continued to go, this guy here really realized that the safest thing for him to do would be to get back in his lane. So I guess he released the brake altogether, and he goes over, all the way over to that close to the median. I mean, like, very close. And then he straightens back up, which pulls his trailer, like this. He goes all the way over, then he does this number, and then it lines back up again in the lane. Doesn't hit me. And since I was coming to a stop and the truck in front of me was still trying to stop, he was sliding at this point. I had come to a stop before him. I had beaten him because I went over onto the sand. You know what they say in the Matrix. You remember what Morpheus says to Neo when he first is talking about the Matrix. He says some rules are meant to be bent, and others can be broken. Some rules can be bent, some can be broken. So, being that the CB radio had been pretty quiet, and I'm seeing a bunch of trucks, not knowing this black ice is there, I come to a complete stop, and I'm waiting for this truck in front of me to clear, and I'm seeing behind me, I'm seeing trucks, spinning and stuff like that. Quickly, I flip this thing up, I grab the CB radio, and again, I'm stopped. And so this is technically me on the drive line, driving, and I should not be technically doing anything technically distracting, but I'm stopped. Now, as we've talked about in the past, and you probably know this if you know Schneider, they have what's called the SMART. They have a patent on SMART, which is SMART, which stands for scan far and wide. That's the S. M is make your space safe, the truck around you, make sure that the surroundings are safe. Anticipate the actions of the people around you. Remain focused. And then the T is tell others your plan. Well, real quick, when I come to a stop and I'm seeing the truck in front of me is still trying to regain his control, I quickly grab the CB radio and I say, there is definitely black ice here. You better keep it slow because semis are spinning out. And I quickly throw the CB radio back up there. I know I said there's definitely black ice here, and I said something like that. I said a three-part thing. There's definitely black ice here. I said one other thing in there, and then I said trucks are spinning out. What was the middle thing I said? I said, keep your distance. Keep your distance. That's what I said. I said, keep your distance because trucks are spinning out. And I started hearing, Roger that, driver, oh, yeah, oh man, I'm spinning out over here too. And I'm hearing people, respond at that point. And people are talking on the CB radio. So to me, that was a safety call, telling others my plan. I didn't want to get rear-ended. I didn't want to have a big collision behind me. I wanted to tell these drivers, you better slow down. You better extend your distance. Because, these trucks that were behind me, the truck that pulled over in front of me, making room for the other guy to continue on past, they were all pretty much tied up there. If that truck did not pull in front of me, the guy that was over there that was going faster, he would not have been able to keep on going. And then the truck behind him that turned on a slight angle, people were going were not leaving enough room for black ice warnings. And so since I had come to a stop real quick, that's me saying bending the rules. I wasn't moving. but I was on the drive line, technically on the interstate. But I was watching that truck in front of me regain his control. I wasn't about to hit the gas again or even take my foot off until I saw, you know, enough distance there, and I knew, because if he was sliding right there, I was going to drive right into it. And he ended up regaining control. Nobody got into a collision. As soon as I started driving again, I kept one tire on the sand and one tire on the black ice, and I coasted along until we were pretty much clear of that. The rest of Wyoming was more or less the same, you know, leave plenty of distance. And then I got to but there was one thing that stopped me. I got to Rollins. When I got to Rollins, as I was approaching, I hear on the CB radio that the Wyoming DOT has stopped all traffic east and westbound between Cheyenne and Rollins. So they said, there's a Flying J there. You better take that and see if you can park it, because on the app it's saying that it could be 4 to 5 hours. It could be stopped for 45 hours. And so I was like, okay. So I go ahead and pull off on the exit. And this is a truck stop that had so much snow that everything compacted down into ice. It was very compacted. And there were still piles of snow and stuff like that. And I pull in here. I stop, you know, let a couple guys park. And then I start to back into a space that I found. And I have the power divider on. So that way it's not just one of my drive tires is spinning. All of them are spinning. And I am gently trying to back up, and my tires are spinning. So I go forward a couple of feet, and then I put it in reverse again, and I start to back up slowly, and I'd say, okay, just gently maintain the same kind of gentle pressure. But the truck, you know, when the tires are spinning, just the natural pull of the truck wants to make the tires spin. So it's like, oh no, I think I'm going to just spin. A lot of torque. So I start to do my back up. It's faster than I would really want to go, especially due to the conditions. But me going as slow as I possibly can is going, and this is by no means like, it's not going fast. It's just faster than I really wanting to go. And when it comes to me straightening back up again, I realize there's not a whole lot of forward room. And if I creep forward a little bit, I can then get some momentum and go back a little bit, but then I start spinning again. And I need to pull forward farther forward. But I don't feel comfortable because there is a semi that is stopped right here. And if I start to go forward and if I slide, I'm going to slide right into him. I don't want to do that. So if I get too close, like normally, you know, if the conditions are good in a parking lot at a Flying J or something like that, I'll pull up, you know, within a foot. I know where the front of the truck is. And so I'll pull up pretty close like everyone else does and then give myself maximum room to back up. But I got like 2 or 3 feet away, and I'm like, and because I know that the tires are sliding when you go from a stop to moving, I'm like, so what I do is I jump out of the truck and I ask him if he would mind, because I was like, you know, maybe 5 feet off the back. The end of his truck was just like about 2/3 the way over on my right. I asked if he would pull over just a little bit, just pull forward maybe 8 feet, give me enough room to maybe pull forward so I can straighten up and come straight back. He says absolutely. So I'm like, thank you so much. So anyway, I get to a point where I'm going forward and backwards and forward and backwards, but I cannot get over this one place because I don't want to go too fast as I'm backing up. Otherwise, because I could have pushed up over this, but I realize that if I'm creeping backwards, all of a sudden the tires start spinning at this one place. And I'm glancing around and I see that some of the guys out there in the parking lot had put one chain on one of the drive tires. They obviously have their power dividers on. And I tell you, that looked really appealing. But here I am sideways blocking off the way to the fuel islands because that's the only way in at this point. I'm literally blocking it. And then, of course, the truck, being that it's a flatbed, it loves to sit there and run out of air pressure. So it just sits there and it says, cannot shift gears because we're out of air pressure. So I have to pull the brakes. I have to sit there and idle and hit the gas and let it build up its pressure again. In the meantime, I'm looking at these trucks just like watching me. And the guy that ends up being in the space right next to me, he has a big old grin watching me. He's on the phone on his Blue Parrot and just big old teethy grin watching me. So I'm like, all right, do I put on the tire chains? I jump out, I grab my tire chains, and what I do is I jam them under. I just lay them out and then jam them all the way under the tires. And I push it as close as I can under the tire on both sides, on the drive tires on both sides. Because at this point, I was in a straight line. All I needed to do is just push straight back. I just could not get over this one little area. And so I just laid them down. And then what I did is I pulled forward about 6 inches, a foot or something like that. And then I went in reverse and I started to accelerate. And as soon as my tires caught those chains, it was instant traction. And I just pushed straight up and over and I backed right into the spot. Then I go and retrieve my chains. And I tell you, tire chains work. I don't like the idea of messing with tire chains. I've never been to the point, I've always been smart about my paths and saying I want to avoid having to put them on because that means that the road conditions are not going to be good. And I don't want to have to mess with them. Going over the Donner Pass, I was prepared to if I had to. If it was mandatory, I would have just cursed a couple of things. I would have gotten out and put them on. In Wyoming, if they told me to do it, I would have done it. And I tell you, that just firmed it up in my mind. I don't want to mess with tire chains if I don't have to, but I will not hesitate one moment if I think I need it for safety reasons. If they tell me to do it on the road, I will do it, and I may cuss about it, but I'm going to know that they work and that I should do them. So anyway, I got into that parking space. I do a post trip. And then I log off thinking, okay, I've only gone 200 miles today. This totally sucks. But if it's going to be 4 to 5 hours before they open it back up, and then I still have the CB radio on, and then someone says that, well, there was a fatal crash, and they're saying that it could be 8 hours. I'm like, I don't know where that came from, because I look at the app, and I'm hitting refresh on it. It's still saying, at this point, it says there's no ETA expected. So I'm like, all right, the rumor mill says it's going to be now 8 hours. I'm like, that's almost a full, reset, or not a reset, but that's a full 10-hour off. I go ahead and shut down. I do my post trip, and I'm looking at, I go ahead and start trip planning and figuring out where I want to go. Because I had pretty much decided I had 2 places I wanted to go. And I knew that if it was going to be too late in the day, and I couldn't make it to any of those two places in Nebraska, which is my goal, I could always stop there in Cheyenne if all goes well. And I would at least fuel up and then stop in Cheyenne. But now that I was looking at it saying, okay, I'm going to have to stop here up to 200 miles. Might as well restart there because the weather was going to start to get bad again at sunset, but I would at least have less trucks on the road and could look at it again if I started like at like 10 p.m. And then even then, I knew that that if the roads were clear, they should be a little snowy, but it would, at least the roads would be open and I could at least drive. So if I had to sacrifice time, I would do it because there was no place else for it to go. But anyway, so I'm looking over and planning out where I'm going to stop. I'm looking at the Flying J app. I'm looking at trucker paths saying, all right, this is this many miles. This is this many miles. As soon as I get to Nebraska, it's smooth sailing from there on. And I'm starting to look at this. And I go back and I hit refresh on just to see if there was an update. It had been 10 minutes since I last looked at it. I hit scroll refresh and it says I-80 eastbound is open. All of it's open. And so quickly, I throw everything down because I'd only been shut off now for 35 minutes after I did my post trip. So quickly, I'm like, I'm going to hit the road again. So I'm like, that is me technically doing a stop for 30 or so minutes. So I go ahead and quickly jump back out since I had just done a post trip like 30 minutes before that. I go out there and do a TIV, tire check. And check the load, and I jump right back. As soon as I hit the gas, it's slightly downhill, leaving my parking space because I was pushing up into it. That's one of the reasons why my tires were sliding before. Power divider's still on. I pull out straight over, and I pull straight out. Just keep that momentum nice and smooth and constant. And I pull right on out and pull up on the 80, and 80 is smooth sailing. There is not really any black ice. So I start hitting the road. It's saying speed limit is 65. Then when it slows down to 55, I'm like, okay. And then it slows down to 45. I'm like, there's a reason for that. I'm not seeing it yet. Here's the thing about black ice. You don't see it there. Wyoming is luckily straight. Now, as you don't get distracted. You pay attention. I wasn't listening to to anything other than the CB radio, and I was listening to that for weather reports and potential alarms of what was going to be going up in advance, like any black ice spots or any kind of any information is what I was on for. Not listening to anything else. So it's just basically concentrating on the road. And as I'm going down this road, occasionally I would feel my drive tire start to spin, and I would feel the truck real quickly start to spin sideways. Okay. When that happens, take your foot off the gas and don't whip the wheel, but steer ever so slightly towards the direction you're spinning. So if the tires are starting to go this way, you don't spin. You don't turn the wheel this way because it's going to completely spin you out. What you do is if the truck starts to spin this way, you go this way. That way, your nose and your drive tires are staying in the direction that the wheels are going. So the rear tires, the drive tires are starting to go out this way. You steer this way so that way you can stay in alignment and pull it back in. Foot off the brake. And that happened probably 3 times. And I pulled it right back in line. And so the instant, not even a second, it was the second I would be spun out in a second. So as soon as I felt it start, and that was a jerk. I didn't actually do that. I would just do this number. I would turn just a little bit, not enough, not like flinging the wheel, but just a little bit and straighten back up and then pull myself right back in. I was in the right lane. That happened 3 times. Never once did it take me more than maybe 2 or 3 feet off of, took me over to the side of the lane and back in. Never took me into another lane. And I was leaving plenty of room. And also at this point, there were not a whole lot of trucks on the road. So there weren't even trucks on my left or right. Once I got to about Laramie, it started thickening up. And then the last bit to Cheyenne, I had to stop someplace. So between Laramie and Cheyenne, I had to do a load securement check because it was 154 miles from Rawlins to Cheyenne. And so I had to do a load securement check. So there was a rest area. I pulled off there, did my load securement check, jumped right back on, 25 more miles until I got to Cheyenne. And at Cheyenne, I put another 75 gallons in because I knew that I was going to be filling up again in Nebraska the next day in about 600 miles. So I was like, I'm not going to just go ahead and go crazy on these fill-ups because it's giving me a fuel assignment every 600 miles. And I can, as long as I put in at least 75 gallons, I'm going to get my number on the Flying J app to go up a little bit more by another half a point until I hit 4. So at this point, I left Cheyenne and the roads are completely dry, completely clear of black ice and everything. And so it's a speed limit 65 mile an hour all the way to Big Springs. Now I had like an hour and a half left on my clock, and I think it was 75 miles to the next truck stop. But the one in Big Springs has a lot of parking. And I looked at it and said, you know what? It's already been a pretty eventful day. I've already cleared. I got out of Wyoming. That was my big goal for the day, is to get out of Wyoming. And once I got there, I knew that I could leave early enough the next day out of Nebraska to completely clear and not have to worry about drama of the road. It was going to be smooth sailing from there on. So I had the day where I did all the pickups in Donner Pass. I had the day that ended with me going through Salt Lake City and ending with me on the side of the road. Then I had the day of me fighting through black ice in Wyoming and the shutdown of the I-80. And now I made it to Big Springs, and there was not a whole lot of trucks out there parking. So I was really happy. I got to the point where, great, there's a guy literally next to me. He walked right in front of me, and he's over there coming up. He's just watching me record. He just turned and walked away. That's when I pointed, because he was over there just looking. He was trying to get my attention. Anyway. So I went ahead and stopped in Big Springs, did my stop, took a shower. And that was the first shower. He's walking the other way now. He's trying to get my attention. He's going to get right in front of the camera, right behind it. Anyway, I'm not going to do this. This is the first time I had actually had a shower in 4 days. because I had stopped at the Pilot Flying J, and then I had stopped, and that was when I left and did my deliveries on Monday. It was full, so I had to stop in French Camp for Tuesday. Yeah.
Hey, how you doing?
All right, how are you? So let's try this again. I hadn't had a shower in 4 days because I had left the Pilot Flying J. I had done my drops on Monday, and then there was no room in the Pilot Flying J, so I stopped at our drop lot in French Camp. Night 1, no shower. Then I stopped after going through the Donner Pass the next day and stopped in Verde. Day 2. Next day, I had made it through Salt Lake City and stopped down in Evanston. Night 3. On the side of the road. Then I had driven the next day, and I finally got to Big Springs, and that was day 4. Now, I will tell you, those wipes, those Ignite, I think they're called wipes, that are like thick. There's like 10 of them in a pack that big. They are nice and thick. You start at the top on your face and you work your way down. Don't go in reverse order. Start at the face, then go to the armpits, then go to the crotch, then go to your feet. And I tell you, those things work. Back earlier, before I got those things, if I went 2 days without a shower, I felt like I could go 1 day. Like if I showered today, I wouldn't necessarily have to shower tomorrow night, and I would not be happy about it, but I wouldn't feel yucky, icky, whatever. But I tell you, you do 2 or 3 days and you feel it. You feel like just anything. You feel like every bit of dust in the air is collected on your skin and whatever. I'd gone 4 days without anything other than those wipes, and I still felt pretty good. I mean, I could tell I hadn't taken a shower, obviously, because you don't wipe everything down. I felt okay. Wasn't happy about it. As soon as I took a shower in Big Springs, I was like, this is what it feels like. It's so great. Anyway. So, next day, I get up early in the morning, because every single day, if I can gain, like if I drive, let's say 10 hours, maybe 10 and a half at most, 10 hours is what you're going to aim for. Because the last hour, is going to be, might be a little bit over, might take you down to 45 minutes or something like that left on your clock. And you stop there. Then you have your 15 minutes of pre-trip, 15 minutes of post-trip, and that's just the minimum. And then you have your 30 minutes of doing something else in the middle of the day. That's a total of like 11 hours, maybe 11 and change, 12 hours, something like that. If you have to add stops in there too, it's going to be over that. But here I am, having just driven that day, and I wasn't going to go on. So I had been driving for like 9 hours and 45 minutes, something like that. My total clock for the day was at like 11 and change. And so if I'm going to be off for 10 hours, I'm basically gaining back 3 hours out of a 24-hour time period. I'm only working and doing a 10-hour off time for 21 hours. So that gives me 3 extra hours. So I can start earlier the next day. That's the way I like to go. One of those hours is going to get chewed up by time changes. Going from Pacific to Mountain to Central to Eastern. One of those hours goes away every now and then. But then, that's the way it is. So I go, so I leave, and Nebraska, I go off, and I go on the Nebraska 2. I go around Lincoln. I get on, it turns into Iowa 2, and you go into Iowa for 13 miles, and you get down there, you get to Kansas City. I fueled up in Kansas City, and then I hit the interstate again. I get on 70. I think it's 70. Yes, it's 70 at that point. And this is where one of those things that just annoys you about four-wheelers. We all know that funeral processions, you have police officers that basically stop traffic at the beginning and at the end of it, and everyone who's part of the funeral procession puts their hazard lights on, and they just all go together. Those people can be so inconsiderate, though. I am going down 70, and I look up ahead, and I see that we only have 3 lanes at this point, and I see that that there's a pull off that comes in from the side, and it turns right into this road. But there's a police officer that pulls over into one of these lanes. So there's only 2 lanes in right now for me on 70, and police officers taking the right lane, and they're pulling off onto that and pulling straight into that lane in front of the police officer, and they're all staying about 50 feet from each other and going 60 miles an hour. Well, I see this up ahead, and there's a lot of cars with their flashing lights on. I'm like, okay, funeral procession, be respectful and whatever. I get it. As I get up there, I'm not passing them anymore. I turn on my signal because I realize that my turn off is coming up. I have to turn right in about a mile. And so I turn on my signal, and I move up next to, but these cars are starting to get like 50 feet. They're 50 feet from each other. And I am, I move over to the right edge of my lane and then come back over. I'm doing this a couple of times. I have my signal on. They're not budging. I accelerate. I slow down. I'm looking at this coming up in less than a mile, in half a mile. There's my turn. I'm like, that's 30 seconds away. And if I slow down, I'm not at emerging speed anymore. These guys are being inconsiderate. They're not going to let me in. I give it a quick honk of the city horn, hoping that's going to be enough and not air horn them, or highway horn them. And they just continue to do it. They could just continue to drive. And I'm like looking at this like, come on, move. Let me go over. Let me go over. And they are not. So, and I keep, I go over to the edge of my lane, not in their lane. I don't bully them like that. But I go over to the edge of my lane, like here, and then I come back over. I'm like, come on, let me over. And they don't. And I'm looking at this in less than a quarter of a mile. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. I sit on the air horn. I grab it and just horn. And I see that the car that's right there, and the car that's even with, the back of my trailer, because they're 50 feet away and I'm 65 feet or so. And both of them quickly jump over into the next lane over, the one I need to be in order to make my turn. As soon as they do that, I start creeping into that lane. And they all start hitting the gas. Oh my gosh, a truck cannot possibly be in our funeral procession. So they all start accelerating real quickly. And behind me, they start accelerating and start to pass over. I'm like, guys, you're going where I need to go. You're being inconsiderate. And so as soon as I start to see these cars literally whipping over, it's like it's like they were told not to go farther than 50 feet from each other. Don't let anyone get in there. I'm like, you're being inconsiderate. I got to make a turn here. And so when I moved over into that lane, they start accelerating, whipping over in front of me. And the guys behind me, they're starting to come out behind me and whip around too. I'm like, guys, I got one more, and I'm still trying to get over there. I'm just waiting for these cars to clear out. So again, as much as I hate having to do this, as they're starting to pass me, I sit on the air horn again. I just sit on the thing. And as soon as this car, he whips over into the next lane over, because it gives you two turn off lanes. It basically turns one lane into 2. And at that point, I'm like, okay, this guy whips over I'm starting to see the other car that's back there starting to pull out again. And I'm like, guys, you're being jerks. I stay on the air horn at this point. I'm so frustrated. And at the same time, I'm nervous. I don't want to push these guys. I don't want to get in their way or whatever, but I'm like, you got to let me pass, because all this funeral procession is just, 100 cars or whatever with their hazard lights on, blocking up traffic for a good mile or two, however long it is. There's so many of them, and you got to let people over. So anyway, I sit on the horn again. And the vehicle that's over there on the right, he moves over a lane, but the one on the back part, he's still starting to pull over, and he comes up and starts pushing on the other guy. And I'm like, you know what? You guys are being really, really inconsiderate. And I know that this lane, the lane that they're in right now, is not the lane I need to be in. At the very least, I need to be in the next lane over. So at this point, I'm like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I continue to sit on the horn. I quickly turn on the right turning indicator, and I sit on the horn again. And those cars over there are probably cursing and whatever else. I don't care. I need to safely move over. They're not letting me do it. And it doesn't matter if I speed up or slow down, they're being inconsiderate. So I slowly start moving over, and I get on the edge of that they see me moving over. As soon as I get on the right edge of the line, I'm still sitting on that horn at this point. Finally, The cars that are on the right-hand side accelerate in front of me and whip in front of me. The cars that are behind me whip around me on this side. I'm like, thank you, someone gets it. So now I'm able to safely make my turn. And as soon as I get in that lane, I'm exiting. Funeral processions can be full of jerks. So if you happen to work for a funeral company or know someone that does, tell people to inform everyone that's in the party that they need to allow people to if there's an exit or a turnoff, they still need to let people to pass through there. You do not need to sit there 50 feet from each other. You need to let people make their turns. It's inconsiderate otherwise. Anyway, so I made my turn. That's the only real eventful thing that happened that day. I got all the way to Kingdom City, Missouri. And I shut down for the night. And by this point, my hours I'm starting to back up. So I'm really happy about this because I'm starting earlier in the day. This morning, I was able to get up at about 1 a.m. or so. I was able to leave. I passed over into Eastern Time. I was driving down the road, and I knew that my next fuel assignment is going to be in Nitro, West Virginia. But they only have 39 parking spaces. And I have to reset at this point because I'm out of hours. I reset before, remember the day in Sacramento and Donner Pass. Next day was traveling through Nevada and Utah. Next day was Wyoming to Nebraska. Then Nebraska over to Missouri. Then Missouri to where am I right now? I'm in Kentucky. That's 5 days. Today's Saturday. So I left on, it's because I was fully reset on Monday. I did my drops on Monday. That's why. I did my drops on Monday. And that only took like 5 hours. And then I drove the next 5 days. That's why. I was looking at seeing 11 to 12 hours. If it was 12 hours a day, that's like 5 days would be 60 hours. What did I do with the rest of those hours? And it's because I dropped off on Monday. That's why. All right. So I was able to make it all the way here. And here is, what is this place called? Oh, it is Catlettsburg, Kentucky. I stopped there as opposed to pushing on to West Nitro or to Nitro, West Virginia, because that's another 130 miles. When I stopped here, I had just under 3 hours left on my clock, my drive clock. I could have made it there and fueled up. The thing is, though, if I did that, 39 spaces does not give me much of an opportunity. The time I'm shooting this video, it is the day before the Super Bowl 2024. Tomorrow is the Super Bowl. So I know pretty surefire that I was not going to be able to find a parking spot at the Nitro, West Virginia truck stop. And if so, I didn't want to take that risk. So I went ahead and shut down here. It was a much safer thing to do. When I got here, there was like a total of maybe 20 people in this entire parking spot. Now this place is full. No, not full. There's still some spots. Probably behind me. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's definitely spots. I would say it's maybe at like 80% capacity from at least what I can tell, but there's a lot of spaces out here. Now, here's another thing about Wyoming. Wyoming, in addition to the black ice, they had heavy winds. It said 55 plus mile an hour bursts. If you were on a tractor trailer combination that weighs under 40,000 pounds, I-80 is close to you. Supposedly, the flatbed and the truck weighs 33,000 pounds. Empty. I imagine that each pod is probably at least 2,000 pounds. If the stuff on the 3 pods I'm carrying is at least 1,000 pounds, I'm going to be over 40,000. But I haven't weighed myself since I learned what the weight limits were for pods. A 16-foot pod, weight limit is 4,600 pounds. 12-foot pod is 5,100. And then a 7 or 8 foot pod is 5,600. So 5,600, 5,100, and 4,600. These are 16 footers, 3 16 footers, so they can't exceed 4,600 pounds. I assume that 2,000 pounds of that or so is probably all the metal and stuff like that in a pod. But I have not weighed myself. So when I pulled into the cat scales, I decided I was going to weigh myself for the first time. And I will turn this on. I don't know if you can see it very well. It tells you that I weigh 50,000 pounds. So over the steers, I'm 11,520. And the drives are 19,820. And then the trailer are 19,180 for a total of 50,521. So yeah, we're in good shape. I was concerned that for some reason I was thinking, what if I'm not over 40,000 pounds? What if they only have like a couple of sofas in there and maybe some bikes or light boxes? I couldn't imagine them doing that and getting pods for that. But maybe. What if the pods don't weigh 2,000 pounds? What if I'm not 40,000 pounds? I started to have all these thoughts in my mind about maybe I underestimated this. In the future, I think I will try to scale myself at some point if I'm going to be going through frozen Wyoming again, knowing that the wind is almost always bad in Wyoming. I think I'm going to do that just to be on the safe side. Because when I was going down the road, I was rationalizing and saying 2,000, 2,000, 2,000. That's a total of 6,000 plus, as I understand it, 33,000 pounds. That's 39,000. I mean, that's if they're empty. That means we'll be getting close to. So if I'm ever taking green tags, 16 footers, I can see what they would be completely unloaded. And then I could, sometime I'm completely empty, I could also check and see how much the truck and trailer combination is with the empty flatbed. And that way I know what it is with green tags. So empty pods, I know what it is with a completely empty trailer, and I know what it is when it's full. That way it'll give me a better idea. I'm going to end up doing that at some point. Okay. Only other thing really to report, today was smooth sailing, left early, just driving down the interstate. No problems. It was nice. The only other thing I will note is that my paychecks are still showing 5 cents as a fuel bonus, as a performance bonus. And I'm puzzled by that because right now I'm showing up as I should only be getting 2 cents. The thing that comes to mind is that it was probably based on my October through December performance. And at that point, I was still doing long hauls and there was not a whole lot of drama on the road that was causing me to go slower. That was causing me to sit there and idle in traffic or to creep along sometimes at 25, 35 miles an hour. There was still traffic every now and then, but I was able to drive at night. And if you recall, I like doing that. As soon as I got into January, that's when things really started slowing down. That's when my score dropped. My fuel efficiency started dropping because I started going through areas like when I went through in January and I had to go up through the north, through I-90 and I-94, go all the way up on the top of America, and everything was going, and we were going a little slower up there. So if that's the case right now, my fuel economy is probably down. Actually, if I look at it now, it might have gone back up because I've been able to sit there in more of a cruise control type foot maneuver. I mean, I probably haven't gotten as good a fuel economy when you're going slow, when you're going really slow through Wyoming. But I mean, I temporarily dropped, and I think part of that was because the truck, needed to have preventive maintenance done. Once I got my PM done, I did notice the performance was better, and it gets even better. It feels better at least, and then it gets even better when you're driving in non-frozen weather, because I think the truck isn't working nearly as hard, and I think that you make better speeds on the road. So when it is very much packed, when it is very much in bad shape, and everything is going slower, your fuel economy is going to go down due to weather or whatever. So, I think that's pretty much it. I'm resetting right now. I did the same thing I did last time that ended up working out really well. Last week when I was in Lathrop, California, I got there at like 9 a.m., 8 a.m., something like that, after driving in overnight from Arizona, from Lake Havasu City. And I walked into the Pilot and said, "Can I get an entire pizza?" And instead of them giving me a box, I said, "Could you give me, you know, the little individual ones? Like if you got an individual slice, can you put 2 slices per one of those and just give it to me that way in 3 different boxes? I'll buy the entire, you know, pie for $16 or whatever. I think it was 18 in California. Here it was 15 or 16. And then I said, if I can get that and a drink. And I did. And then I came in here and ate more pizza than I should have. I ate 4 slices. I have 2 in the fridge, and then I'll throw them in the air fryer tomorrow like I did last week. And that's all I'll eat, and I'll enjoy my time off. I have home time scheduled for this upcoming Friday, so I'll go to sleep tonight. I have all tomorrow off, or I got to figure out something to do. And then I will, on Monday morning, I will, because I made pretty good time. I originally didn't think I'd be able to get there until Wednesday, but it looks like I'll be able to get about 250 miles down on Monday. So I'll be able to get from here, I'll fuel up, and then I'll get to where I'm going by 6 a.m. I'll do my drop there. I will do my drop in the Washington, D.C. area by, I think, 11 a.m. Maybe I have it listed as noon. I got to look at my ETAs again. And that reminds me, I need to submit the actual ETAs to pods on the app now. So anyway, that's what I'm going to do. I will go from here to drop off my first 2 loads. I will sleep, and then Tuesday morning I will drop off the other one. And then hopefully they'll give me an assignment going from Tuesday to Friday that will give me an assignment that takes me back home to Atlanta so I can have my home time. So that's the plan. Thanks for watching.